Hey, Dooberteers, welcome back to the show. My guest today is somebody who has quite a bit to share with us. I'm super excited for this dialogue because not only did she initially in her career, you were a baker and you wanted to be a pastry chef, but then she's really in the last decade or so moved into the animal welfare. She's got all sorts of degrees and knowledge, and you're just going to love what she has to share. And the fact that she has a cat that fancies himself as a dog, right? I mean, we all have animals that like to think there's something else. So, Hanna, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. That was a fun introduction.
I'm super glad to have you here because, like I said, I'm really excited to talk today about, what you're going to share this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and your organization, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Hanna Lentz. The organization is supporting people in animal relationships for change, but we go by SPARC.
Shorter.
Yeah, shorter, easier, and fun. We have a lot of fun with that name, and there's lots of sparkles in our world. So we're an organization that's focused on how we message and tell stories in the animal care and well-being space. And we think about that as a very big umbrella to animal care and well-being. That is, shelters and rescues and clinics and municipal animal services and fosters and, someone who's helping their neighbor and their community with their animal. And we have really spent a lot of time looking at the kinds of stories and messages in our work, how it shapes our work, and found, there's some that are actually holding our work back or can be harmful. And so we talk a lot about what we can be saying instead so that we can help move our work forward and make sure that animals and their people are treated with kindness and dignity and respect.
Yeah, we know the importance of words these days, right? Words matter. How you frame things, how you tell the story. I mean, talk to me about some of those things because I know what you guys are doing is very much data-driven. This isn't just, you decided this sounds better. You're really looking underneath the covers to say, what really helps us to reach the right kind of people that we're looking for?
Yeah, 100%. So, there's so much, like the kinds of stories we tell, they're giving us information about how we can see the world. And so often we're getting like a snapshot into the life of an animal or the life of a person. We hear about that one moment when an animal is brought into a shelter to be rehomed, or that one moment when, someone may go to a clinic and, need care for their animal and then finds that the bill is out of reach, right? We hear about that one moment, but we miss that whole bigger story. And the problem that happens around that is so often that leads to judgment or blaming, because we don't understand the larger conditions that are happening around people and their animals. And, there's lots of ways in which our language has separated us, from each other. There's a lot of us versus them that happens either, between organizations, or it's the shelter versus members of the community, feeling like pet owners are the problem rather than our partner in the work that we're trying to do. So we really have recognized that there's so much in the stories that we have been telling and sharing, and we've almost trained ourselves. We've trained the public on how to think about certain issues, how to think about animals and pet owners. And we're finding that some of the choices we have made in our messaging might not actually be helping us out now because, there's really important work to support people and animals together, to support the human-animal bond. We deeply value this relationship between people and their animal companions. And we know it's something really intense, 98% of people in the US see their pets as family. So we know the vast majority of people really care about their animals. But our messaging isn't necessarily reflecting that. So we're talking about how can we make sure that our messaging is helping us move forward so that, animals can stay with the people who care for them, that that deep bond isn't broken. Because, the conditions around us now, whether it's, the economy and inflation, expenses of things, not enough pet-friendly housing, that can all make it really hard for a pet family to stay together. So we have specific principles, and we talk about the kinds of messaging that we really want to be using now to do our best work.
I really love this. I mean, you're helping other organizations, I'll call it, to be more effective, right? You're giving them tools, you're giving them resources. You're not judging. You're just saying, hey, instead of this, try this, right? And look at the type of impact. And further, you're explaining the why. Like, why does this matter to tell it this way instead of that way? Because oftentimes we don't stop to think about the words that we use and the, I'll call it negative repercussions sometimes that they can have unintentionally.
Yeah, that's right. And like, we really trust that people in this space want to do what's best for, animals. And in trusting that and believing that, we're like, we know you want to do this. So there's some tools that can help you do that even better, right? And so it's not about saying, oh, you've been doing it all wrong. It's like, how can we do this work even better? How can we support you so that you have the tools that you need so we can be effective? As you said, it's about being as effective as we can be.
Hanna, I want to talk a little bit about your journey because, from somebody that was a baker and wanted to be an aspiring pastry chef, I mean, go back on the time machine, take us to the point where you said, listen, I love animals. I want to dedicate my life to animals and this particular niche, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is kind of interesting. The story goes way back because I was like one of those kids that was always really into animals.
Sure.
There was a local sort of rescue that was in a strip mall. I grew up in Ohio, and there was like this rescue in a strip mall, and my parents would drop me and my friend off on Saturday mornings when we were like in elementary school, and we would, do their laundry. We would clean dog cages, and then as I got a little bit older, my parents would let me foster litters of kittens and puppies. So we had that happening in our house. So I was always like really into animals. When I went to college, I worked at a farm animal sanctuary, and sometimes my school schedule revolved around that. I was like, I have to be at the farm at like 7 a.m. to muck the barn. So I always had classes later in the day. But when I went through school, I got a degree in English and writing. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm not going to be an English teacher. And then for animals, I thought, well, that's not a career. That's what I thought. That's not a career. But I worked as a baker on the weekends. I loved cooking and baking. And I thought I will go into pastry because I love making things and my creative side. So I started working at a French restaurant outside of Philadelphia right after school, and did that for a little bit. And then pretty quickly realized this wasn't like what I wanted to do. And my soul was saying, like, anything with animals, do anything with animals. So I went back home for a month, and I swear I sat in a room for a month and applied to like any animal job I could possibly find. I got a job as an adoptions coordinator at what was the Washington Humane Society. So it's animal control in DC. So I moved to DC for that job, and I worked at animal control for several years. I did adoptions and then behavior. And I actually will say I didn't get hired for that job first. They hired somebody else. And then 3 months later, they were like, that person moved into another role. Do you still want this job? Took me a while to get in. So I did that. And then I just got really passionate about the field and the work in this space. I think I had a lot of aha moments in that job, in adoptions, and seeing how, I thought I went in the beginning thinking like my job was kind of like to protect animals and, to make sure that they never went to the wrong person. And it was much more of a gatekeeper mentality. And I think through that work, realizing how my like ideas about people or my judgments about people were so often like way wrong. And, it just really changed my orientation to being much more of like a matchmaker and a connector than a gatekeeper. But then I decided to go back to school. I worked at a shelter in Massachusetts for a little while. And then I actually did international work for a number of years, maybe 7 or 8 years. I was the international program officer for the companion animal program at an organization called IFA. So I got to do work, it was an incredible experience. I got to work all over the world with communities around the world who were interested in developing humane dog and cat population management programs. So I traveled a lot, and I got to see animals in a lot of different situations and work with people from the different situations. And I think for me, what was particularly interesting then is, very much being like a white American woman going into, other people's communities, other people's homes. I was lucky to be surrounded by folks that recognized that like that is actually, that's like a great privilege. And like, how can to be invited in like that, to be, asked for like not my knowledge or information or support, I think really helped shape my sense of like, what can it actually mean to be supportive, and not come in like, I know everything, like I have all the answers, like my way of doing things is right. And so that work really centered around understanding what does it look like to provide support that is respectful and moral and isn't like dependent on me or doesn't like center me and my knowledge. So anyway, it was like a real game changer in just how I think about this work in general and how we support people. And then from there, because I got to experience so many people who are so passionate about animal work, not so passionate about the operational side of work, or, that's like, we get it. The people are getting into this because you want to help the animals. And then it's like, oh gosh, like fundraising and HR and like running an organization. So I thought, I'll go back to school again. I'll learn about all of that sort of like non-sexy side of this work. And maybe that's a way I can be helpful. And then I co-founded a nonprofit consulting firm called Impact by Design and co-ran that for a number of years, 7, 8 years. And through that, this is a long story. Through that, I got to work with a lot of shelters and organizations all around the U.S. on things like planning and developing programs and, creating new initiatives. And that's kind of like the seeds for SPARC started when I was in that work. So when I left, I didn't lose it, left that job, I was offered to help get SPARC started. And here I am.
Nice. Tell people, give us like the mission statement, the intent of SPARC, right? Because obviously it came out of all of this work that you've done, but what are you trying to do?
Yeah. Our mission, oh my gosh, I should have the mission statement written right in front of us. We just went through strategic planning and came up with this mission statement we're so excited about. But our mission is to change narratives for the well-being of animals and people together. That is not the exact language, but our whole thing is about shifting narratives, which, when we think about messaging and storytelling, narratives are sort of like that one level up with like how that affects us in our minds, like the way we think and how we approach certain situations. Even when I was telling in my story about kind of switching more from being like a gatekeeper to more of like a connector in this work between people and animals, that's sort of like the space where narratives are. And the messages and the stories that we're surrounded by all the time, they feed into that, like how we approach a situation. Even it's like the adoption application in front of us or the person coming in feeling like they can't keep their animal. So that is what our work is about. We see ourselves as like one really critical piece of the puzzle to, solving some of the big intractable problems in our work, making sure that, animals are safe and healthy and well cared for. We're not like, narratives are not everything, but they are like an essential piece that if we're not working on it and if they're not part of this, then we can't do everything we want to accomplish or as well as we could be doing it.
Yeah. So would you describe your SPARC as an educational organization that's helping the rescues and shelters and other facilities to change the framing of their message?
Education is a big piece. People come to us very interested in learning about what better messaging can look like and wanting to apply that into their work. I would say that we're also a movement building organization because there's a lot of folks who already sort of like feel passionate about this. I think it very much aligns with their values, and it's about recognizing we're not alone. I think one of the really amazing things has been as we start talking about these principles and new narratives and new messaging, how many folks have said, I have been feeling this way. This has been bothering me, but I didn't know there was like something I could do about it, or I didn't know there was a term or like a framework that I could apply and it would make a difference. And so, yeah, I think a lot of folks have sometimes felt alone in feeling that way, because especially if you get on social media, You're just
Yeah.
like bombarded with like blame and shame and negative messaging. And I think sometimes it can feel like, am I the only one?
Right.
Want it to be this way? And I think folks, we've all found it really uplifting to sort of find each other and realize there's so many people in this field who feel this way. So part of our job too is getting people what they need, bringing people together, providing that ongoing support. So folks feel like when they go back to their day-to-day work, go back to their organizations, these new practices can actually come with them and keep going. It's very easy, of course, to like learn something new. And then you go back to the real world and you're like,
Right.
how do I do this every day? So we want to keep supporting people.
I love that. Can you give us maybe an example of something, just so that people can resonate with? How do you help people to reframe something from the old dialogue to maybe a newer way of looking at it?
Sure. So it's very common, especially now as we have been seeing and hearing about a lot more animals who are being brought in to shelters because people say they're moving. And often the way that, this story is, a lady came in, she dropped off Bugsy, the cat, and she said she was moving and then left, and that's it. Like, that's the only thing that we get. And then usually, and I'm just giving a social media example because it's an easy one, but this is about messaging everywhere. It shows up, right? And then you get all these comments like, how can people do that? I would never abandon my animal. I would, live in my car before I would bring them to the shelter. And so it continues to perpetuate this idea that behind every sort of animal that ends up in an organization, behind any issue with an animal is this individual who failed them. There's an individual to blame. And then we end up, thinking, well, we have to kind of like one by one, like fix people, or just think like people are kind of terrible. So we got to constantly batten down our hatches and, figure out how to protect animals from, individual bad people. But so that's messaging that is often around us all the time.
Yeah.
And we talk about one of our main principles is called systems framing. And it's about recognizing that, people do make choices and there is individual responsibility, but the choices we make depend on the choices that are available to us. And it's really the systems and conditions around us and in society that determine, who those choices are available to, when those choices are available, what those choices are. And it can be incredibly unfair for so many reasons. And so, all of us are constantly navigating these systems. Like, what can we do and what options do we have? And sometimes the unfairness in those systems breaks up pet families, right? It's, someone who sees their rent go up 40% and because they, for whatever reason have had to be on a fixed income, they have to move. Right? They literally don't have the money for that new rent, are looking around. And we know there is not enough affordable pet-friendly housing for all the people who need it. So they're looking around, they're like, there's literally nowhere for me to go with my animal. I think oftentimes folks think, well, the compassionate thing to do is for my beloved pet to I want them to be in a stable home. I don't feel like I'm stable anymore and I don't have a place to go, right? Like people are just put in impossible situations. And so, when we think about systems framing, we're saying, let's tell these stories. Like we have to actually tell the bigger story of what this system is that pushed a pet family into this situation of feeling like, are being forced to move and not being able to take their beloved animal with them for whatever reason. So systems, right? It's like talking about systems, and framing is how we make sure that that's part of the message. And, if we were around those kinds of messages and stories all the time, right? It leads us to think really differently about the situations that we're dealing with. It also leads us to think more about finding solutions to those systemic problems. We're like, okay, if this is an issue where we need more pet-friendly housing, we need more affordable housing, or maybe if there's like temporary foster or something so that people have a minute to be able to get back on their feet so they can be reunited. Those are all like longer lasting, very impactful kinds of solutions rather than just feeling like we're drowning in the intake of animals.
Yeah, it's such a nuanced point, but it can have such a big impact.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. I mean, one of the challenges I'm sure your organization has is how do you measure the progress, right? It's got to be hard for you to motivate your team to keep going when you still see so much negativity. So how do you convince them that, hey guys, we're on the right path? We're just going to change minds, one person at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a couple. These are things that we have heard. One is that it actually has helped a lot of teams just feel a lot better about their work. Like when you're oriented to, oh, we're problem solving and we're figuring this out with people, it feels way better than feeling like every person who comes through the door, every person who calls is like an enemy or like a problem to be solved, right? Like we're partners in problem solving. That feels way better. Also, because organizations, it's helped them now sort of, allocate some attention and resources towards some of these deeper, systems solving problems. I think about one organization that is in the greater Chicago area, Treehouse Humane Society, and they were having issues with at their clinics with like people not showing up or coming late and compressing schedules, or not being able to make it to like a recheck appointment, and then it turns into an emergency, and all of these things loaded stress, right, like onto staff. I mean, obviously that's not great for the animals and the people either, but it was like, negatively impacting the organization. So instead of, just kind of going to that like default question of like, why are people always failing to show up or not respecting us or like don't understand? It's like, how could we redesign this so that we can increase access? And they started asking folks when they called or, initially scheduled appointments, curious questions about how do you plan to get here? Not as a judgment, but just as a wanting to better understand what their clients were dealing with. And, they heard things like, well, I have to wait till payday to have the gas money, or I depend on my neighbor to borrow their car, or I have to make sure that the transportation schedule lines up with the clinic hours. And so there were all these things they were hearing. And so instead of getting frustrated with people and maybe doing things like being like, okay, now there's like a fee if you're a no-show, they rethought how they were going to provide that care. And those were things like bringing clinics to community hubs where people were already going, shifting some things around clinic hours so that they align better with transportation schedules, making vouchers and things like that available, doing more clustering of scheduling by neighborhood so that, they knew certain, that helped increase access. And in the end, they said that felt kind of like subtle changes for us, but it was really transformative. And so, and you think about like the stress they were feeling around that. And so that actually helped them, right? So we can still, changing systems. I mean, yes, it's great for the pet families too. It's great for our organizations and our teams. Like it can really change the interactions that we have, how we're showing up in this work. So I think that is like, that's very good positive reinforcement when that kind of thing happens. So I think those are big ones. And,
I like that. I love, just as you were talking, I was visualizing things differently. And like you said, sometimes reframing things, these small changes, have a big impact on the mission that you're trying to do, but also internally on the organization, because less stress means less frustrated people, means burnout, all these other things that are, sometimes we call them the soft benefits instead of hard benefits, but they truly can go to the bottom line, right? To helping an organization to run more efficiently. And as you said, they're small nuances, they're small changes. And sometimes just having that dialogue and saying, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Have you gotten, in the corporate world, we talk about big tools like Six Sigma and the 5 Whys and things like that to get at the real root cause of the problem, because sometimes it's something that's often overlooked.
Totally. I love the 5 Whys.
Yes, me too. I love that
all the time.
Yeah, I use that one a lot. Yeah. So, Hanna, as we start to come to the end, I always like to do a little bit of a lightning round so we can learn a little bit more about you as a person, as a leader. So just a bunch of fun questions to get at the real you. So you ready?
Okay.
All right. First one is a simple one. Do you prefer kitten purrs or puppy breath?
Oh gosh, brutal. The purrs, but that doesn't mean I don't love puppies so much.
It's hard, right? I totally get it. You're equal lover of both.
Yeah, I'm really cool.
Okay. In your life, are you more of an early bird or a late night owl?
Oh, early bird. I love a morning. I love an early morning.
Up at the crack of dawn. I like it.
Yeah,
What do you
that's
like
my.
to do to decompress after a tough day?
Oh, I walk, and like walking with my dogs is that is like my peaceful decompression time. I literally sometimes I feel like my mind, all the thoughts, it's like a ball, right? Like a knot. And then when
Yeah,
I it's like it loosens up and I start to like it starts to actually make sense. I literally just have to plan time to quiet, like just to think. So I walk. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, it's like a processing time, right? Like when you can, because they don't care about all the stuff that's in your head. They're just happy to be outside with you.
So happy.
So speaking of your dogs, if they were to write a Yelp review of you as a pet parent, how many stars do you think you'd get?
Oh, it's maybe between 3 and 4. Um,
Oh, room for improvement.
Yeah, well, okay, because I think they'd be very generous. Like they're so loving. Like so I know that they'd be like, "Oh, we want to give you a 4," but like let's be honest, we don't get enough walks during the day. We do want more treats. We want you to wake up the second we're ready to wake up in the morning. Yeah, I think that they would still, I think they want me to, I don't think they want us to cater to them a little bit more, but they're loving.
I love that. I mean, and you knew right away exactly what they wanted more of. They're collaborating. They got their top 10 list from us.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I totally get it. Anna, my last question for you is what do you want your legacy to be?
Mm, I would say the very first thing that comes to mind is I would when I leave, like I hope that the road forward in this work is that I leave a space for other like so other people are able to like jump right in and like be even more successful. Like I want
Yeah.
whoever like I hope whatever I do sets up whoever comes next or who I get to work alongside to be even more successful. Like if I'm helping to create conditions for other people to move forward and, you know, help more animals and people, that would be incredible. I don't know how you measure that, but I don't know if I'm allowed to like break the third wall, but I will say that like we even before we got started, we were talking about this poster that I have in my house that says work hard and be nice to people.
Mm.
And I truly also feel like that's a motto I live by. So if people remember me in that way, like that I was a hard worker and they felt like I was kind, then I will have felt like I did my best.
I love that. I think everything you've done to this point clearly shows that. You've got so much passion and so much positive energy. I really have enjoyed this conversation and I really love everything you're doing to try and help other organizations to be more successful.
Thank you, Chris. Well, thanks for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining.